Hello everyone, Juxtaposition here. Today's video is going to be part 3 of the Haight Ashbury project, which we all know Haight Ashbury project is a CIA private bank funded and money laundered general operation. Now, what I mean is that there are dozens of subcontracts that the CIA is pursuing concurrently, simultaneously to the HAP, Haight Ashbury Project. It's a catch-all for a number of different projects. Operation Midnight Climax, which is being run with prostitutes to dose their clients with LSD and then videotape and audio tape the prostitution experience. That kind of falls under HAP. It was going on in the 50s before there was the Haight Ashbury Project. So I think that it was sort of consolidated into the HAP after 1965, but that was an existing project. Operation Sea Spray, dumping toxic chemicals on civilians over the San Francisco Bay Area. I don't know if they were doing that in the 60s. I assume they were, based on the fact that they're doing chemtrail dumpings on a daily basis in the North Bay. So I'm assuming they haven't stopped dumping toxic chemicals on people since 1953 in the San Francisco Bay Area. And I understand they're doing that all throughout the whole United States, including Yonkers and Queens, New York, and Malibu, Los Angeles. They're dumping there, and Seattle, and Mount Rainier, and Montana, big sky country. Anyway, what I'm telling you is that we had the Operation Midnight Climax and Operation Sea Spray going on before the HAP, Haight Ashbury Project, was rolled out. Then we had the Bill Graham free concert concept, which was going to envelop the entire San Francisco Bay Area and extend down to Monterey and out to Altamont, which everybody thinks is a raceway on Midway Road, out off of Altamont Pass Road, and just north of Patterson Pass. Nobody seems to know about Patterson Pass. Patterson Pass is an equally important road that will take you to the Lawrence Livermore Weapons Laboratory. Patterson Pass comes right down to the front gate of the Lawrence Livermore Weapons Laboratory, whereas Altamont Pass does not. It skirts the lab by about a half a mile. Anyway, you've got the free concerts to create a honeypot for kids, out of high school or in college on spring break, and or graduating soon, or have graduated but don't have a job. In other words, these are all the people that are eligible for mandatory conscription draft, and you have a 50% possibility, if you're selected in the lottery system, you have a 50% chance of being sent to Vietnam, which doesn't really exist other than in a military industrial conference room. Because there was no country of Vietnam, and there was no North Vietnam Navy, there was no government of Vietnam. There's just 47 provinces that the French colonialized by moving the Jesuits and created a Roman Catholic colony in Hanoi. And most of the Catholics lived in the north, which paradoxically is where the Walter Cronkite and CBS Evening News wants you to believe that's where all the communists are. Yeah, they're where the Catholics are. Because in the south, in the Mekong Delta and Saigon, they're Buddhists. They're Buddhists. The whole country is 70% Buddhist. And the only reason it's not 100% Buddhist is because the Jesuits indoctrinated and repositioned contractors into the North. The North is the reason that they colonialized the North the most, is that's where the minerals are. And that's where the heroin is, aka the opium. The opium is in Burma. And that is why you want to colonialize the Hanoi area, because Burma is inland, it's landlocked, but it's in close proximity to Hanoi. That's where Yoko Ono's father was sent to be a private banker in the 1940s. Yeah, Hanoi. Just before Pearl Harbor, Yoko Ono's father was over in Hanoi before Pearl Harbor. It was also in San Francisco, yeah. Yoko Ono's father worked in Tokyo, Hanoi, San Francisco, and Manhattan, New York. Right. Because he's in a private banking nobility family. All right. Anyway, getting back to San Francisco, they had many number of projects going on, including the concept of having free health care, like Medicare, only for kids. And it was called the Haight Ashbury Free Medical Clinic. Now, that didn't officially get rolled out until June 1967. However, I believe that the apparatus for the concept of free drugs and free STD testing was in the works during the 1965, which followed on the heels of the so-called Bay of Tonkin incident, which Jim Morrison's father was involved with. He's attributed to have been calling it in on Navy intelligence. You should know that Jim Morrison's father was a rear admiral in the United States Navy and in charge of the fleet, the Navy fleet, including the USS Maddox and the aircraft carriers that operated in the Bay of Tonkin during 1964. And he was the youngest rear admiral in the United States Navy. So that's kind of a red flag, right? Because he can be manipulated very easily because he's very inexperienced. So anyway, we now know that the Bay of Tonkin incident, which was that 3 patrol boats, aka armed with torpedoes, in other words, PT-109 Jack Kennedy wooden patrol boats, which are reconnaissance boats, they're not to attack, but that 3 of those wooden boats approached the USS Maddox destroyer on it was the official story was August 4th, 1964. Turns out that was a lie. Turns out there was no incident that happened on August 4th, 1964. Allegedly, through listening to Robert S. McNamara, who I wouldn't believe with a 10-foot pole. That guy is a complete pathological liar. I have a lot of personal intel on Robert S. McNamara. S stands for Strange. Robert Strange McNamara. That's befitting because he's a passive-aggressive, sissy boy, coward, strange bird. And it's befitting that he would be a graduate of UC, University of California, Berkeley, and Harvard MBA. Because Harvard graduates sissy, coward creeps. Jeffrey Skilling, didn't he graduate with an MBA from Harvard? I personally know a half a dozen MBAs from Harvard. They're all sissies. Every single one of them is a sissy. They'll run. And I don't think sissies should be, the War Department secretary, which is what Robert McNamara became, the defense secretary. It's what Caspar Weinberger became. He has a master's degree from Harvard also, and an undergraduate degree from Harvard, as does Daniel Ellsberg. He has an undergraduate and a master's degree from Harvard. And he's a sissy boy coward too. Worked for the Rand Corporation, worked for Edward Lansdale before Vietnam War happened. He's a pathological liar. They all are. That's apparently what they teach you in those indoctrination center, how to lie with a straight face. Anyway, getting back to 1965, because there's a lot of applied linguistics with respect to the Haight Ashbury Project, because they have concealed 99% of what they were doing, nefarious activities, right next door to the Presidio Army Base and Letterman Hospital, which includes a bioweapons laboratory, which nobody talks about, and is adjacent to University of San Francisco, Jesuit, and Lone Mountain Campus for Women, Jesuit, and St. Ignatius de Loyola High School, Jesuit, where Paul Pelosi attended, and St. Agnes Parochial Catholic Elementary School, grades kindergarten through 8th grade, where Kevin Collins was kidnapped from, never to be seen again. A couple blocks from where Patricia Hearst lived. A couple of blocks from where Jerry Garcia and the Grateful Dead house is. Just a couple blocks. Like 1.5 blocks from St. Agnes Elementary Parochial School, which is 1 block from the Haight Ashbury Free Medical Clinic CIA operation. All right, so in 1965, in my previous video, which I'm not going to rehash, but that's when Timothy Leary came to town, Ken Kesey, Sharon Tate's father, Colonel Paul Tate, who's stationed at the Presidio, which is half a mile away to a mile. This is when Bill Graham, Wolf Grajonka rolled in from Manhattan, New York to promote free concerts with no venue and no paycheck. But Abigail Folger's mother would take care of that, Ines Mejia. So Ines Mejia is living in Pacific Heights, and she's attending St. Ignatius Parish Church, which is right across the street from where the Haight Ashbury Free Medical Clinic ultimately ended up. It's a few blocks from there. And they're operating out of these Victorian houses in the Haight Ashbury neighborhood. There was no Haight Ashbury Free Medical Clinic in 1965, not officially. There didn't exist until June 1967. However, all those provisional housing that the clandestine services controlled did exist, and there were offices in many of those houses. There was also the Straight Theater, which ultimately became the home for the Process Church, but it was a theater. It was a regular theater where they had plays and movies because it had the auditorium seats. And we also had the Scottish Rites Temple on Geary Boulevard, about a mile from this zip code, where you could also have performances, which is adjacent to the Fillmore Auditorium. So there's another venue, which eventually was turned over to Bill Graham for his musical concert promotions. But it was being controlled by a gentleman by the name of George Sullivan in 1965. And I'm sure he was part of the program, and he became a problem, I guess, in 1967. So he committed suicide by shooting himself in the back of the head in his car at 2 o'clock in the morning, down near Mission Bay. And it happens a lot when, people don't get along. A lot of people get suicided. Anyway, the apparatus to set up Haight Ashbury existed in 1965 with Abigail Folger's mother, with Timothy Leary, with Hunter S. Thompson, who was there, and Ken Kesey, who was there. One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, which he had written in 1962. It's 3 years later, and there's Ken Kesey with his school bus that's painted in psychedelic colors. And then we have Sharon Tate's father. And then who else have we got there, right? Jim Jones, People's Temple. But he's not really the leader of People's Temple. You do know there's no such thing as Jonestown, right? There's no such thing as Charlie Manson either. Charlie Manson's not in this story. He's up in Seattle in Puget Sound on a Trident missile submarine base in federal prison for car theft for 7 years. And he's in a concrete cell learning to play the piano in 1965. So Charlie Manson, whose real name is Charlie Miles Maddox, is sitting in a prison cell in Puget Sound, not too far from Seattle, out in the bay, on a United States Navy Trident missile base. That's where Charlie Manson is. But in 1965, Timothy Leary and Ken Kesey and Sharon Tate's father and Abigail Folger's mother, they're all in Haight Ashbury scheming to do CIA operations, because they know that Vietnam War is underway. So what can be done to fight the resistance? That's what Operation Gladio is, people. Operation Gladio in continental Europe, NATO, Operation Gladio by the sword. You gonna make me bring this out again? This is a sword. It's the M7 bayonet. This killed Sharon Tate. This killed Abigail Folger. It's a NATO weapon. This is a NATO weapon that was rolled out in 1964, just in time for the Vietnam War. M7. This was used at My Lai. This was used at Cielo Drive. This was used at Waverly Drive with the LaBianca family at Corina LaBianca's home, the mother. M7. Operation Gladio, by the sword. Sharon Tate's father had such a weapon. Sharon Tate's father was involved with Operation Gladio in Italy, out of Verona, Italy, out of a NATO airbase in Verona, Italy, where he had his daughter pimped out to be on the cover of Stars and Stripes at age 16. Sharon Tate. She was pimped out 10 years after Diane Feinstein was pimped out in San Francisco, where she appeared wearing a cowgirl hat and a cowgirl leather jacket with the then mayor of San Francisco in 1950. And there Sharon Tate, in April issue of Stars and Stripes, 1960, 10 years after Diane Feinstein is pimped out in a cowgirl hat at age 16, Sharon Tate is pimped out at age 16 wearing a cowgirl hat. Do you see any irony here? Diane Goldman, that was her name then. It was Diane Goldman. She hadn't married Feinstein yet, which was one of 3 husbands that she had. I think it was the second husband. Yeah, it was the second husband. It was her second husband's name was Feinstein. Her third husband's name was Bloom, and I forgot the name of her first husband because they were only married about 18 months, so it doesn't really count, right? Anyway, I guess what I wanted to tell you is they spent 18 months to 2 years following orders and getting organized for the Summer of Love, which is a complete CIA, Hollywood, record company, television and film psyops. The Summer of Love, 1967, is complete falsehood. It's based on mendacity. And I'm going to quote a recent quote from 2019, October 7th, 2019, from Aaron Valente, age 33, an alumnus of Georgetown University in the Swamp, where Paul Pelosi went to school, where Nancy Pelosi went to school, close by at Trinity College, near Georgetown University. And Erin Valente, there she is, talking to her mother on her cell phone after her visit with the managing director of KKR, 2500 Sand Hill Road, Menlo Park, near Stanford University. She spoke those infamous last words before she disappeared for 5 days, turned up dead. Dead in Almaden Valley, San Jose, about 16 miles south of where she was last seen alive at 2500 Sand Hill Road, the home for Sequoia Capital, the home for KKR, private bank, involved with clandestine services, private banking, venture capital, funding of FTX, Cisco Systems, LSI Logic, Google, YouTube, Zoom, Oracle, Sun Microsystems. You get on the list. It's a long list. And what I'm here to tell you is that Erin Valente's last words were, "It's all a game. It's a thought experiment. We're in the Matrix." She said that in October 2019, before the coronavirus, the deadly common cold, was rolled out as a terrorist attack upon the world. The common cold, the coronavirus, which they had to upgrade to the flu. Anyway, it's all a game. It's a thought experiment. We're in the Matrix. Well, that explains the Haight Ashbury project in San Francisco, which also involves Greenwich Village in New York for you East Coast folks. The Summer of Love was not just about San Francisco. It's about New York. It's about Chicago. It's about Denver. It's about Monterey. It's about Mill Valley, Marin County, CIA residential housing unit, Marin County. So is Monterey County. Carmel and Monterey is a high concentration hotspot for CIA people. If you work at the Esalen Institute, you work at the Himalaya Society in Big Sur, if you work at Fort Ord Army Base, you work at the Navy Postgraduate School in Monterey, you work at the Department of Defense Language Warfare School in Monterey, or you work at the Santa Catalina Academy where Patricia Hearst went, where Abigail Folger went, where Dakota Johnson went, where Tara and Lark Ota went. They're the daughters of Dr. Victor Ota, who was murdered, shot twice in the back of the head with a .38, thrown into a swimming pool along with his wife, Virginia, shot once in the back of the head, thrown in the swimming pool, along with his 2 young sons, shot in the back of the head, thrown in the swimming pool, with their kitty cat. Kitty cat was shot, thrown in the pool. His secretary, Dorothy Codwaller, shot in the back of the head, thrown into his swimming pool at a Frank Lloyd Wright custom home in Soquel, Santa Cruz County, next to Santa Cruz, next to the Dominican Hospital, down the hill from him. 999 North Rodeo Gulch Road. You know what you see in my stories? You see 33 a lot, you see 66 a lot, and you see 999 a lot. Dr. Victor Ota lived in a Frank Lloyd Wright custom home at 999 North Rodeo Gulch Road. Check it out. Now, the home's been destroyed by an arson fire, so it's been rebuilt. It's not the same as it was, but the address is still there. It's still valid. It still exists. And that is in close proximity to University of California, Santa Cruz, which is where Huey Newton graduated, where Angela Davis is a professor. Social engineering crisis actors. The Summer of Love was rolled out on Saturday, January 14th, 1967. That's when they had a free concert in Sharon Meadow, which again is across the street from the campus of University of San Francisco and St. Ignatius de Loyola High School and the Lone Mountain Campus for Women. Golden Gate Park is across the street. And there's a meadow where they typically host Opera in the Park and other festival events. You do have to rent porta potties and you need a city permit issued from the San Francisco Board of Supervisors. So, or the city of San Francisco. But something of as important that's going to draw thousands of people is going to be rolled through the city council, which in San Francisco they refer to that as the board. They refer to that as the Board of Supervisors. I refer to it as the City Council. I refer to the County of San Francisco as City Supervisors. There's a blending: South San Francisco, Colma, San Bruno, San Francisco, City and County. And you should know that it is reported that 30,000 kids attended this free concert. I'm going to call poppycock on that. I've attended the many concerts, mostly for to celebrate the opening of the opera season, to do Opera in the Park, which is a free concert, and it's a full house. I've been there. I mean, there's not one blade of grass that you can't see that there's beautiful mowed grass because there's so many people there. And I would estimate the crowd at 8,000, 9,000 people. And there's lines in the porta potties, and you would need hundreds of porta potties if you were going to have 30,000 people, and I never saw hundreds of porta potties. So what I'm here to tell you is the logistics and the telemetry data do not correlate to these poppycock numbers. The history books also tell you that Altamont free concert with Mick Jagger and the Rolling Stones, where Neil Young was present but didn't perform, where the Grateful Dead were present but didn't perform because they allegedly got into a disagreement with the Hells Angels, if you believe that story, which I don't believe that story. I never had a problem with the Hells Angels. They were not a problem. They're gentlemen, and they're well paid, okay? They're not going out to a free concert in the middle of, the winter time for free beer, okay? They're not stupid. They work for the clandestine services. They're used to getting cash money. All right, so what I wanted to tell you is that I don't believe there was 30,000 people at the Summer of Love concert, and there weren't 300,000 people at the Altamont Raceway. Again, 10,000 is 15,000 tops, because you have neighbors that are ranchers that are ranching and grazing cattle all around the perimeter of that property, which is on Midway Road. It's not on Altamont Pass Road. It's near Altamont Pass Road, but it's also in the same distance away from Patterson Pass Road. Patterson Pass Road will take you to the Lawrence Livermore Weapons Laboratory, which is on Department of Energy property. And I believe that the Altamont Raceway is also on Department of Energy property, as are all those cows that are grazing with the neighbors next door, because they have underground facilities there for the Department of Energy experiments off of Coral Hollow Road, which nobody talks about. Coral Hollow Road and Patterson Pass Road are home to underground tunnel systems and coal mining areas. Coal mining. And there is a coal gasification facility for the Lawrence Livermore Weapons Lab. That's what I call it. They don't. The Department of Energy calls it LLNL, Lawrence Livermore National Lab, as if they're curing cancer. I'm calling it what it is. It's a weapons lab, and they have a coal gasification underground facility. They also have other underground facilities in the area around where this, free concerts was held, on December 6, 1969. So getting back to Sharon Meadows, I don't know how many people were there, but Timothy Leary was there, and he uttered the words, "Tune in, turn on, drop out." Kind of precedes the Aaron Valente's, "It's all a game, it's a thought experiment, we're in the Matrix." It's kind of a play on the Timothy Leary, "Tune in, turn on, drop out," if you ask me. Anyway, that was on January 14th, 1967, a Saturday, free concert with porta potties in Golden Gate Park in Sharon Meadows. Sharon Meadows is named after a banker who donated the land. A banker. Do you see what I'm saying here? All right. So that's January 1967. What happens next? Well, there's a whole series of concerts that happen next, including concerts back in New York. But just to stay on the West Coast for a second, KFRC Radio, which was owned by RKO, which brought you the Cielo Drive murder scene where Sharon Tate was killed, they also owned KFRC Radio. KFRC Radio promoted the Summer of Love in the San Francisco Bay Area. They promoted the Fantasy Fair Magic Mountain Festival, which was Michael Bowen was the so-called promoter. He was the front man. I'm sure that Bill Graham participated in this as well, behind the scenes. And this was a concert 2-day. It's very ambitious. That you start at the Marin Civic Center, which is in San Rafael, and you get on buses or hop on the back of a Hells Angels Harley Davidson, and then you are transported up to near the top of Mount Tamalpais, Mount Tam. This is on June 10th and 11th. That's a Saturday and Sunday. June 10th and 11th, 1967. I'm extremely familiar with all of this property and the few roads that will take you there. I can't imagine transporting too many people up there. I used to do an annual bicycle race, which finished at the parking area where the buses let the people off to go to an amphitheater, which is right next door to this parking staging area, where our finishing line was just, about, 500 yards from where the buses would drop the people on a summit ridge. And it's kind of a natural bowl near the summit of Mount Tam. Mount Tam is 2,560 feet, and the area that I'm describing for the buses to stage is probably 500 feet below the summit. So I'm going to say it's about 2,000 feet of elevation. The roads, there are several roads to get to this location. Let me just think here. There's two. There's two ways you can get there. They're both dangerous, hazardous, and to be on a school bus, I think you're out of your mind, okay? Very dangerous, especially going down, because the brakes are going to go out. It's really steep, and it's really steep for 6 to 8 miles of descending, curvy. So there they pulled off this concert. They did charge. It wasn't free. They charged a fee. It was nominal. And anyway, there you have it. And then right immediately the next week, they had the Monterey International Pop Festival, which was also being promoted on our AM radio station, KFRC, out of San Francisco. And that was for Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, June 16th, 17th, and 18th. And that featured the who's who: Ravi Shankar, Jimi Hendrix, John Phillips, Janis Joplin, the Beach Boys, but the Beach Boys didn't perform, nor did they show. Otis Redding. During all of these concerts, the Sharon Meadow, Tune In, Turn On, Drop Out, the Fantasy Fair and Magic Mountain, Mount Tam Music Festival, and for the Monterey International Pop Festival, the concepts of the movement, because everyone was feeling they're losing control, like COVID, like the COVID mandates that people are being told what to do, being bossed around by the government, right? So there were movements, peace movement, right? There was the hippie movement. There was the flower power movement. There was the flower children movement. These are all CIA concepts. I mean, kids in high school and in college didn't cook up the hippie movement. We had beatniks before we had hippies. Okay? Flower power, what's that? And I can assure you it's nothing. And just to demonstrate my point, let me play you a song from that was released from Hollywood. This song was allegedly written by John Phillips, whose father was a United States Marine Corps officer who grew up in Alexandria, Virginia, which is 6 miles from Washington, D.C., and 12 miles from Langley, CIA. And this is where John Phillips went to military academy parochial school. In a school similar to Diane Goldman Feinstein, she went to the Sacred Heart Academy, and John Phillips went to something similar in Alexandria, Virginia. If you can imagine John Phillips wearing a Catholic uniform and being bossed around by nuns, that's John Phillips' background. Nothing, this is before the mamas and the papas and the flower power and peace movement. John Phillips was a parochial Catholic schoolboy, John Phillips. And he wrote this song for his partner, Scott McKenzie, not his real name. Scott McKenzie, just to let you know, his real name is Philip Wallach Baldheim III. He was born in Jacksonville, Florida, which is a Navy facility town. He was moved almost immediately to Asheville, North Carolina. I don't know what the family was doing up there, but that does coincide to when they began what's called urban renewal in the city of Asheville. Now, urban renewal is code for get the black people out of here. That's what urban renewal is. Anyway, Philip Wallach Baldheim III sounds like he came from an affluent city family of nobility. And he is partnered in Alexandria, Virginia, where he split his time. He spent half his time in Alexandria, Virginia, and half his time in Asheville, North Carolina. But while he was in Alexandria, Virginia, he befriended John Phillips through his mothers, because their mothers were friends. Scott McKenzie's name somehow got invented during this time, and they formed a band. John Phillips and Philip Wallach Baldheim III formed a band that was called a doo-wop band that was referred to as the Abstracts. They went to New York City to get some work. Of course, the suits there told them we got to change the name to the Smoothies. Then they were allowed to sign with Decca Records, which is owned by the same people that own EMI. Decca Records signed the Rolling Stones. EMI signed the Beatles. You should know that that's RCA Victor and Columbia Records, CBS, the evil Masonic eye. So, in other words, the Rolling Stones, Paul McCartney, John Lennon, Brian Epstein, John Phillips, Scott McKenzie, who's really Philip Wallach Baldheim, they're all controlled by the evil Masonic eye. That's who owns their records. Michael Jackson's music is owned by the same people that own Paul McCartney's music. So, in other words, there's only a couple places. There's RCA Victor, there's Columbia. You have to control the radio frequency. It's techno enslavement. So you can sign a contract with any number of a dozen different companies, Capitol Records, Paraphonics. It doesn't make any difference. Reprise, Atlantic Records, like Neil Young did. You're working for Warner Brothers, CBS, or RCA. That's who you work for. It's those three, including Amazon. So my point is that Scott McKenzie was born Philip Wallach Baldheim. And he apparently did not write the music lyrics, the musical lyrics to If You Are Going to San Francisco. However, he did sing the lyrics. And I will play it for you now. Okay? This is the lyrics to Be Sure to Wear a Flower in Your Hair. The song is entitled San Francisco by Scott McKenzie. Okay, I'm going to stop it because, it's too slow of a beat, right? So I do have the lyrics. The lyrics have a lot of social messaging in them. I really don't think John Phillips wrote these lyrics. I think the CIA wrote these lyrics, okay? If you're going to San Francisco, be sure to wear some flowers in your hair. I don't see John Phillips from parochial school military training writing that. If you are going to San Francisco, you're going to meet some gentle people there. Yeah, let me explain the gentle people in San Francisco. The Zodiac Killer, the person who put a bullet in the back of George Sullivan's head, the guy that owned the Fillmore West Auditorium. Somebody murdered him on August 2nd, 1967. This song was released on or around May 17th, 1967. The Zodiac Killer was alive then, right? And he's probably living at the Presidio Army Base, which is in close proximity to the St. Francis, to Haight Ashbury. All right, so you're going to meet some gentle people there. Yeah, like murderers, like Sharon Tate's father. What do you think he did for a living? Paul Tate. Everyone, Sharon Tate got bayoneted. Well, her father is associated with terrorism, murder, bombings, exploding bombs in plazas in Italy and subways. That's what Operation Gladio was. And her father was in Operation Gladio, which I've told you is by the sword. All right. Across the nation, such a strange vibration, people in motion. There's a whole generation with a new explanation. People in motion, people in motion. For those who come to San Francisco, be sure to wear some flowers in your hair. If you come to San Francisco, summertime will be a love-in there. If you come to San Francisco, summertime will be a love-in there. All right. Get the message there? There's a message there, right? You bet there's a message. And I think what's even more disturbing is the songs that were written for the Jefferson Airplane and performed by Grace Slick, who was with the Great Society in 1965. She was with the Great Society. But when we got out to 1967, she was put on stage in Sharon Meadows to play White Rabbit. And White Rabbit was a go-to song for the Jefferson Airplane. But this song was created in 1965, but it was rolled out in 1967. White Rabbit. One pill makes you larger and one pill makes you small. And the ones that mother gives you don't do anything at all. Go ask Alice when she's 10 feet tall. And if you go chasing rabbits and you know you're going to fail, tell them a hookah smoking caterpillar has given you the call. Call Alice when she was just small. When the men on the chessboard get up and tell you where to go, and you've just had some kind of mushroom and your mind is moving low, go ask Alice. I think she'll know. When logic and proportion have fallen sloppy dead, and when the white knight is talking backwards and the red queen's off with her head, like Marie Antoinette. Remember what the dormouse said. Feel your head. Feel your head. It's a story about LSD. That follows the Timothy Leary Tune In, Turn On, and Drop Out, which was verbalized when this song was sung. Tune in, turn on, and drop out. And you know what you can get at the Haight Ashbury Free Medical Clinic, and you know what you can get on the perimeter of Sharon Meadows? You can get free LSD. I can attribute to that personally because the first Grateful Dead, the only Grateful Dead concert I ever attended was at the Oakland Auditorium at Lake Merritt. And when I walked through the front door of the auditorium, I was offered free LSD. So I'm assuming free LSD was available in San Francisco for the Summer of Love for the January 14th Saturday free concert where Grace Slick performed White Rabbit. And I don't believe that the San Francisco song by Scott McKenzie was performed. That was beamed on the radio throughout the United States to create the national psychosis that this is San Francisco. I think a more accurate quote of San Francisco is from Mark Twain, who I believe was a clandestine soldier. He's like a Hunter S. Thompson of his day. Mark Twain, Samuel Clemens Samuel Clemens is Mark Twain, made famous from his book Huckleberry Finn. But what I want to attribute, there's a famous quote that's attributed to Mark Twain. I don't know if he actually spoke these words, but everything with CIA doesn't really make any difference who came up with it. He wrote, "The coldest winter I ever saw was the summer I spent in San Francisco." A similar quote was attributed to Paris, France, so it's kind of sketchy. What I want to tell you is the weather in San Francisco is really quite good. In December, in January, and February, it's excellent. And the weather in June, July, and August in San Francisco is terrible. It's freezing cold. And that's because it's real hot out where the Altamont Pass is and the Lawrence Livermore Weapons Lab. It gets, 95 to 105 degrees out there, and in the Central Valley of California, Tracy and Modesto. And that heat creates a vacuum and sucks the cold air from the Pacific Ocean inland. And it creates a wind Venturi effect in the city of San Francisco. And that's what makes San Francisco so friggin' cold, is the temperature drops due to the weather system. Anyway, what I wanted to sort of summarize here is that none of the events of 1967 were random or organic. It was all choreographed and planned by Hollywood, CIA, and the social engineers, the anthropologists of the day, the people that employ applied linguistics and liar, liar, pants on fire concepts and themes like flower power, and to create the illusion that the kids had some kind of political clout. They had no power in political. They're disenfranchised. We had the Vietnam War despite all of this, didn't we? Yes, we had 10 years of the Vietnam War, which made billions of dollars of profits for, the companies that we talked about. Monsanto, Dow Chemical, Raytheon, Missile Guidance Systems, Lockheed, Northrop, General Dynamics. Also wanted to tell you that all of these false themes are promoted through Time Magazine, Life Magazine, which are all owned by Condé Nast, and Vanity Fair, and Vogue Magazine. They all roll up into just one or two big corporations headquartered in New York City. And that it's not a secret that Joan Didion is writing all about Haight Ashbury and the comings and goings. She doesn't know anything about it. She went to University of California, Berkeley. She married John Dunn, who is a Princeton graduate, who works at Life magazine. And Joan Didion worked at Vogue magazine. Then she quietly leaves Vogue magazine and writes all about the Charlie Manson trial. And not only is she writing about the Charlie Manson murder trial and the cult family known as the Manson family, not only is she writing about it, she purchases the wardrobe for Linda Kasabian, who is the star witness for the prosecution, 14 days on the witness stand, which meant that Joan Didion had to purchase 14 dresses at I. Magnin in Beverly Hills for one of the key prosecution witnesses, who's age 19 and has two little children, who the district attorney is threatening to take away from her unless she parrots the words that we all agree he did it. So what I'm telling you is that Joan Didion is married to John Dunn, who's the brother of Dominic Dunn. And Dominic Dunn is a social engineered, paid CIA writer. He covered the O.J. Simpson case, the Jose Menendez, Lyle Menendez, Eric Menendez falsely accused of murdering their parents case. Joan Didion covered Haight Ashbury. She covered the Manson cult, which never existed. It only exists in Time Life. They gave you the moon landings. They gave us the Zapruder film, which they kept concealed for decades, and it was never released until it was heavily edited. So you cannot trust Life magazine, Time magazine, Look magazine, Vanity Fair, Vogue. You can't trust any of these sources. They're completely clandestine services, just like the record business is, just like the Hollywood films are. All right, that's my point. Thanks for listening. Have a great day. We'll talk soon. Bye-bye.